Hello, everyone around the world, and welcome to our webinar today on WASH successes and failures and lessons learned from both. My name is Barika Poole, and I am a proud partner of Rock Blue, an international NGO focused on empowering water and sanitation utilities to create healthy cities and improve lives. Today, we have an exciting panel of experts. Too often, we repeat less than effective approaches towards international development in WASH. We can and should benefit from our collective lessons learned to improve the efficacy of WASH interventions going forward. Our distinguished panelists have decades of combined experience, and they will be sharing lessons they have either experienced firsthand or learned from others. Experiences of successes and failures, both of which should lead to improved future efforts in WASH. So we're going to start with a few initial discussion topics for the panelists and then have a Q&A. If you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A at the bottom right of your screen. So today with me, I have Harold Lockwood. Harold is an expert in water supply and sanitation with over 30 years of experience in countries across Latin America, Asia, and Africa, including long-term advisory panel positions in Pakistan and Nicaragua. His particular area of interest is institutional and policy aspects of sustainable service delivery. He holds an MSc and has worked in a wide range of countries in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, including a long-term position in Pakistan between 1993 and 1995, where he was a technical advisor to the local government and rural development department in the Nicaragua Forum from 1996 to 1999. Where he was an advisor to the National Institute for Water and Sanitation. Harold is the director of the UK consulting firm Aqua Consult and regularly undertakes field assignments for a broad range of clients, including national government ministries, major bilateral donors, multilateral agencies, UN organizations, international NGOs, foundations, and private sector companies. Next, we have Joy Makumbe, who's an engineer and managing director of Major Lake Construction. Joy is a qualified civil, water, and environmental sanitation engineer with more than 18 years of experience in the field. She is the founder of Major Lake Construction Ltd, a construction company registered in Zimbabwe, and has led teams of project personnel for the successful completion of various water and sanitation projects in Tanzania, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. She earned her civil engineering degree at the University of Zimbabwe, master's degree in water resources engineering from the University of Dar es Salaam, and a master's in business administration from the Africa University. Her vision is to see more women in Africa take up positions of impact and influence in the engineering and science fields. Next, we have William Muhare, who is a senior team leader of 2ML Consultants. He's also the founder, which is a management and leadership consulting firm and executive director of the Global Water Leaders Group in the UK. He has 30 years of international experience spanning the public and private sectors focused on the management of water sector companies and organizations. His areas of expertise within the water utility sector include change management, performance improvement programs, concept and business development policies and operational procedures, tariff studies, and performance analysis. William has been managing water industry reform projects for more than 20 years. He is responsible for one of the African water industry's great success stories, the turnaround of Uganda's National Water and Sewage Company. He has been involved in over 25 projects of similar characteristics in Africa, the Caribbean, and the Middle East. And last but not least, we have Barbara Rossmiller. Barbara is the Director of Water and Sustainable Cities with Comonix International. She is responsible for technical leadership across all water security, sanitation, and hygiene programming. She is a senior WASH sector governance and institutional strengthening specialist with over 30 years of experience in international development. In previous roles as a chief of party, Barbara led comprehensive water sector reform in Jordan and has also fostered reconciliation through shared resource management in Cyprus. She specializes in managing complex multidisciplinary programs in post-conflict or politically challenging environments. Prior to Comonix, Barbara served as a water, climate, and natural resources practice area director, where she was responsible for portfolio management, business development, and thought leadership for a leading international research institute. She has worked in over 20 countries, including long-term assignments in Jordan, Iraq, and Cyprus. Barbara holds an MBA from Duke University and a BA from the University of Minnesota. Welcome, panelists. Thank you for joining us today. So first, I'm going to start with Harold. And Harold, can you give us your example of a WASH success or failure and lessons learned from your experience?
Thanks, Marika. I hope you can hear me okay, and thanks for the chance to contribute to this. I want to give you the bad news first, which is the bad news is I'm not an urban utility expert, an urban reform expert by any means. So I keep telling Peter this, but he must be hard of hearing. So that's the bad news. I come from a background in rural water, but I guess the good news is that the example I'd like to talk about, and I would say that, yeah, failure is a very strong word. So I think it's successes and challenges for me would be the order of the day. But what the example I'm going to talk about speaks to this much broader trend that we see in the rural water sector, which is around professionalization. Now, there's interpretations of what that really means in terms of a concept, but broadly speaking, it's about moving away from voluntary community-based management, which for years, for decades, we know hasn't really worked at all well. And it speaks to improving the management of services, improving the service levels, in line with the SDG targets, household safely managed household level access, which is baked into many countries' policies now for rural water for the sector. So, this is part of a bigger trend, and it also speaks to this concept of consolidation or aggregation, where you're getting service providers starting to incorporate multiple service areas into their management responsibilities. And that you see in a number of countries: Zambia, Senegal, Benin, in Uganda, where William is from. There's somebody on this panel today, where you have public utilities starting to reach out into rural areas. So this is all part of the same big trend that we're seeing globally. So this example I'd like to talk about today also speaks to this issue of government, the state, and how it approaches delivery of basic services like water supply. So it speaks to this kind of pattern of going from centralized approaches, many years ago, to decentralizing, and now almost re-centralizing again. So I think that's an interesting topic, and I hope other panelists will pick up on that. And it also speaks to the story of changing economic fortunes. So the country I'm going to talk about is Ghana, and the example is the Community Water and Sanitation Agency, just so you can stop wondering what it is. So CWSA in Ghana, and Ghana is a vibrant country, growing economically, having some challenges now, like the rest of the world, I think, but is really on a pathway for growth. It has a ever more densely populated rural areas. That line between what's rural and what's urban gets more and more blurred. It has changes in, it's gone up to lower middle income status, so that's impacted the role of grant aid, particularly important for the rural sector, the level of funding that they can receive. So this is some of the big themes. And I'm sure that some people here will know the story of CWSA, but maybe it's a bit of a history lesson. So for many years, I think from the 1960s onwards, CWSA didn't exist. Rural was part of a bigger organization which focused really on urban. And then in the late 1980s, there was a donor conference on the back of discussions stemming from the International Drinking Water and Sanitation Decade, about pledging money to create and establish a dedicated rural entity to really specifically focus on rural water. In the late 90s, CWSA was formed, 1998 specifically, and its role has been to provide guidance, support to district assemblies in providing water to rural populations. So they have a particular role around technical assistance, mobilizing financing, some elements of regulating services, looking at tariffs and so on, and supporting decentralized government to provide water. In about the mid-2010s, late 2015 onwards, there was quite some discussion about re-engineering or recalibrating the role of CWSA, and this was in part a response to the fall in the amount of grant funding available, which had been partially reliant on, but in a very significant way in preceding years. And I was involved, along with colleagues from Ghana, in a bit of a reflection period that took place over about a year to think about what role CWSA could then take on. how it could look in the future. And there was quite a lot of discussion about whether it should continue down this sort of support to decentralized provision, or could it become more of a rural utility? And in the end, it chose the latter and has been making quite some progress in establishing itself as a national rural utility for water supply in Ghana. And I think, I don't know, I'm not so up to date now, but I think it's now managing 180 or 200 schemes, large pipe schemes, and is bringing this much needed level of professionalization into the management of those water supply facilities. So that's the sort of success side of the story, I think. You know, it's following this pattern of consolidation, improving technical competency, you know, staff, and they've done a great job, I think, in that regard. So it should be lauded, and it's in line with the trend. They've gone for the bigger, more viable schemes, the larger ones, and that's, you know, what you would do. You wouldn't want to start where you're going to be set up to fail immediately. But I think this journey that they're on now has raised a number of challenges. Yeah, and again, I would hesitate to call them failures, because they're still defining this role. They're still carving out this role for themselves. And there's a number that I think are worth pulling out for this discussion. One of them is around legality and assets. So, you know, the asset ownership was with the district assemblies. Now, CWSA is coming in and taking over those assets, running them. There's questions about prior investments. So districts, but also communities have put money into some of these schemes over time. What happens to that? You know, how do you account for that equity? Who really is responsible in the end? Linked to that is financial viability. I mean, as I understand it, CWSA has gone for these bigger schemes, which hopefully would generate an income. Now they have to rely more and more on tariff income revenue from these schemes, but they've also had to increase their staff so that, you know, they are a utility, so they've got a lot more staff to pay, bigger payroll. And I understand that they're facing quite some challenges in terms of actually making it work financially. You know, tariff revenues maybe not quite what they thought, costs are going up. There's inflation as well, of course, in Ghana now, which I think is particularly challenging. And then there's the whole issue of regulation. So, and this was something that we spoke about in the whole process of working through and reflecting with CWSA. So for urban, it's quite clear. There's the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission that regulates the urban supplier. But for rural, it's still a little bit in flux. So CWSA had some functions of regulation vis-a-vis the district assemblies, but clearly it can't regulate itself. And so far, that's still not sort of resolved. And that is a very, very important part of the whole puzzle. I'm sure panelists will agree in terms of improving accountability, overall performance, formalization in every respect. So that's another area that's unclear and that's a challenge. I wouldn't say it's a failure, but it's a definite challenge and needs to be resolved one way or the other. And I think all of this experience of CWSA that I've been sort of telling the story of shows that their practice has run ahead a bit of the policy. So Ghana's in the process of finalizing a policy for the sector led by the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources, but it's still not passed, it's still not quite set. And CWSA itself has gone ahead with this function of acting as a utility, but their legislative underpinnings haven't been finalized yet. So there's still an act that has to go through Parliament, which will give them this formal mandate. So really they're operating, not blind, but they're operating on the basis of their previous legislative instrument, which is quite out of date now. So, you know, it really calls into question some of these directions of travel. But broadly speaking, to sum it up, you know, I think this is a success in the sense that it goes for that big thrust towards improving the management of rural water services, which is essential to bring them up, you know, to make put them on par with urban services. Gives them economies of scale. It helps to address as populations grow. So I think that's a really great thing, and I'm sure they're doing great work with that. On the downside, it's a bit of a cautionary tale. There are these pitfalls about being clear on legislation, being clear about the regulation. You know, make sure that you can address these issues perhaps before you take that step to change. And there's other examples in Africa, and I'm sure in other parts of the world of rural service delivery being incorporated into these bigger, more consolidated frameworks, if you like. And I think it is very interesting, this centralization versus decentralization kind of balance. It also speaks to that. So I'll stop there. I think I've used up my allotted time, Barik, and I'll pass it back to you. But obviously happy to answer questions or join in the discussion.
That's great, Harold. That's great. So just like you did say, for the looking at the regulatory framework before an intervention happens, and this is kind of a lessons learned area. What would you say, or how can you, I guess, advise in terms of, an organization or utility to say, let's stop and let's fix this first, or do it in parallel? Or does the regulatory framework, those changing, is it too much of a bureaucratic process that, the project would be really delayed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not just sure this was a project as such. I mean, this is a big kind of institutional reform process that's going on in Ghana, and there are changes in other countries. I think, I know in Uganda there's quite a lot of movement now in terms of national water coming down, these regional public umbrella utilities, and then another approach to point source management. So what I'm talking about here is beyond the project. I think this raises a much larger question around the focus and the intent of the state writ large to improve that accountability. And in one way or another, you have to make sure there's some checks and balances, that there's a referee on the pitch who will stand up and not be cowed by government and say, look, this is not good enough. We have to protect consumers. Equally, we have to protect the utilities. There has to be a fair playing field. And for that to happen, a regulatory regime has to be in place. It doesn't have to be an independent regulator. It can be done through other means. And there's lots of examples, particularly in Francophone West Africa, of regulation by contract, which is a different way of doing it. But so I think it's not quite so easy as saying, oh, you have to put in place a regulator. I mean, that's a big challenge, and really it's the organs of state, the president's office, these big players that have to do that. I would make a little plug for a study we recently completed with SOS, which looked at regulatory frameworks in all 54 African countries, and what you see there is quite a mixed picture, in terms of where it's at. So urban water is, if you think about a quadrant, urban water is doing the best. Most examples of regulation, urban sanitation, less so. Rural water, quite far down the list, and rural sanitation, almost forget it. It's but there are some good examples, and I think so. In Kenya, for example, the regulator there has been quite successful, I would say, in establishing the urban, frameworks and reporting requirements and performance indicators and everything else. They've done a great job, and now they're starting to move out into these what they call SSSP, small scale service providers, both rural and urban, by the way. And the first job that they're doing is making an inventory, because so nobody really knows how many of these things are out there. So they're really just going around and trying to put their hands around what are we dealing with. And that's step number one. If you don't know who's out there, it's very hard to then even think about, okay, how do we regulate? How do we engage thousands and thousands of small operators? So I would say it's as much a question for central government than it is a project or an initiative. I mean, this has to be done. And there's some great examples we found in that SOS study. And if people would like a link, I can add it to the chat or the Q&A so that people can see it. And interestingly, well, this was only in Africa, but examples of relevant regulatory solutions, not just taken from OECD countries and plonked down on the ground, but actually looking at what the realities are in this case, in African countries. There's some quite innovative stuff going on, so it's worth a read if you can get the time.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can put that link in the chat, then people can access it. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much, Harold. We'll come back to, let's see, actually there is a question for you. Actually, I'll do this question now since we're here. So it's okay to advocate for a centralized approach, and it makes good sense, especially if there is a strong leadership at the central hub. But what is your suggested plan B if the central entity has proven itself unable to meet the needs outside the central hub, e.g. the districts? Is there a hybrid model in these cases of failed support outside the central hub, which is not rare, to allow for decentralized services?
This is specifically around the regulatory question or about service provision? I'm not quite clear. Is that?
Let me see. Service provision.
So sorry, Eric, the question is about how do we improve service provision beyond, let's say, the more easily manageable areas that can be reached by a professional provider. Is that in a nutshell, did I get it right?
Yes.
So I think very good question, whoever of our two attendees asked it. I've just put the link, by the way, in the panel chat. I don't know if anybody else can see it, but
Okay, great. Yeah, we can see it.
so yeah, I think this speaks to the fact that for a long time we've had quite monolithic policy positions. So it's all community-based management for rural, and it's all something else for urban, for example. But you know, rural areas are very diverse and very different in different countries. So rural in India means, you know, villages of thousands and thousands at least, you know, quite densely populated. Rural in some big African countries means something else, or in Latin America, where transport is very difficult. So I think I would say that the policy response to that question is, don't think of one solution. You've got to tailor make the solution according to the type of population you're going to reach. And that takes some space within policymakers to, you know, allow for that to happen. And there's no reason why you can't have, you know, private operators operating under PPPs in some part of a country, and in other parts a very different approach, as long as you set it up and support it well. I mean, this is reminds me, I did some work in China and in some provinces in China, and they'd have this tremendous program of building of new infrastructure, pipe schemes everywhere. It's a bit like the Jal Jeevan mission in India now, where they're really churning out, you know, the infrastructure. There's some big question marks over the management of that in the long term, to my mind. But in these discussions, I was asking, well, what do you do about these small communities that are not able to access those, that are in the very remote areas? And you know, they kind of talked around the subject a bit, and then I finally asked, well, how many are there? And it's China, so there's a lot of people. And they said, oh, it's 20 million. You know, this is in one province, and you've got, I don't know how many provinces. So in some countries, it can be a significant part of the population, and you have to devise tailored approaches to support them. So that could be capacity building, access to financing grants, tailoring regulatory requirements to not make them so onerous. You know, there's no point in putting heavy regulations onto a small, you know, rural utility or a community-based operator, some of which can be very good, if that you would put on a big urban one. It just doesn't work like that. So, and if you look at some, you know, countries like the US, you've got a whole mix of models going on, and you've got, I don't know how many, 14, 15 million people served by community-based management, essentially, but it's got a lot of support. It has a lot of financing. It has professional bodies that help provide competency testing for operators, you know, all kinds of licensed people and so on. So the whole system works. So that's a long way from trying to pick up small, very remote rural populations in China or parts of Africa. So I guess the answer to the question is, don't think in one answer or one response. It can be multiple, but it all takes support, money, resources to do well.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Harold. Next, we're going to hear from Joy Makumbe. Joy?
Thanks, Barika. I'm going to start off with a success. You know, and I'll talk about the project that I was involved in Uganda. You know, I got to Uganda in 2016, and the only treatment, the water treatment plant that was there was actually abstracting water from swamps. That, of course, was something which I had never seen before, because in Zimbabwe, you know, we had dams, and that's where we had our abstraction points. But they were taking water from the swamp, and unfortunately, because of upstream agricultural activities, you find that the swamps were actually shrinking. which meant that whatever raw water was needed for treatment was also actually shrinking. So the government had to look at ways in which they could actually augment treated water, to the people of Bushenyi. I was actually in the Bushenyi district. And so you find that with these projects, it was actually political will. It started with the political will of the country, that the president, the ministers, they were in it to say, you know what, this is what we're doing. We're just going to go all out, because it was just not our project that was going on throughout the country. They were doing this massive water and sanitation projects, and the financing was coming from the World Bank. Of course, it was a loan and grant, but the will was there for the people of Uganda to say, you know what, even if it's a loan, yeah, our children and grandchildren will pay, but at least we'll have infrastructure in place. So getting to Bushenyi, you find that there were a couple of boarding schools, and on my way to site every morning, you'd find girls, boys in a line with a teacher who is at the front of the line, walking to look for water in nearby swamps, because that was because the water from the water utility was not coming out. So it was a hazard, because with school children in a line, people can just just horse playing, and they get into the road and they get run over. So I used to really see the site, and it really was terrible. So what the government did, there was a site that, of course, the consultant engineer had done siting, and then they'd done all the engineering work to say, okay, this is a site where we have a perennial water source. It was a flowing river, which now they decided to dam up, and that became the abstraction point for the water treatment plant that we constructed. So we did the whole works. We put in the abstraction point, the raw water pumping, the treatment, and the treated water pumping, the pipelines, and the water reservoirs. So after 24 months, it was really a joy to see that the community now had running potable water. Those boarding school had water running at their boarding schools, and you didn't see kids all over the place, looking for water, for be it bathing and be it washing. So you find the project was successful because, of course, the people, the political support was there, and also not just that, also the financing was available. Just borrowing from Harold, because really with projects, such massive projects, the funding has to be there, such that whatever payment certificates that you put in to pay the contractor, the money is readily available, to pay the contractor so that they continue doing the work. So the financing was available. And not only that, you find that with World Bank, they're really strict. They look at the whole team, contractor, consultant, and see if there is the expertise that they think would be able to implement the project. Because if there's no know-how or expertise, you find that the work really is not done in time and to the quality that is required. So the expertise was there from the consulting engineers. Also, the client, if there were any queries, be it from the consulting engineers, they would quickly respond. Because also something that also delays our project is that either the client or the consultant takes time to answer the contractor or the consulting engineer. So as you take more time, it also means that you're going to spend more money. And sometimes, if it's World Bank funded, they really are not amused, by any other variations that you would submit. So that was successful. Then you find that as you, in the drive of local authorities, central government to provide water and sanitation health for their people, you just can't put hanging pipes. People need a decent place which they're calling a home, and then that home has all the water and also has the sewer in place. So one of the challenges that I have seen during my career is that, governments try to provide low-cost housing for their people, and they're looking at other building alternatives, because we're used to brick and mortar. and sometimes brick and mortar is slow and also expensive. So we had a developer who came up with this technology of using hardwood, for the houses. They put the hardwood and then, everything, it looked like a house, but you find that there was no buy-in now from the stakeholders, because the people that bought those houses, they were saying, you can actually hear someone speaking from outside when you're inside. The acoustics was not great. And also, the walls would also get moist from underground water, because there had not been adequate engineering work that had been put in place, to say, okay, if we're going to come up with these houses, what does the foundation look like? What protection should be in place for the wood, So it was a good intervention. It was low cost, but unfortunately, there were no, the design, the engineering research had not been done, which led to this intervention failing. And also the building bylaws, there was nothing about wooden houses. So you find that the local government would not approve. The engineers, they come there, they don't approve of the house. So at the end of the day, even people had to take down those houses and build the conventional brick and mortar houses, which was really a waste, whereby enough engineering research had to be done. The buy-in for the stakeholders had to be sought, where people are engaged, and they tell where there's a house they would pay for. And at the end of the day, also, the building bylaws have also to move in line with the modern technologies and building materials that we would want to use currently. So yeah, for me, that is the success and the challenges that I can share.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Joy. So let me go back to the success, and I'll just ask you this question. So, what are, in that situation with the water treatment plant, what are the chances that success is durable, and that, that it will, in 10 years time still be there, no backsliding, goals achieved, that it's a successful treatment plant?
Yeah, okay. We used to talk about this with my team, to say, what, we could come back here and then we find that there's a white elephant, but enough research was done on the river, just looking back to say, is it a river that is perennial? Is it going to be flowing always? Or is at some point, it's just going to dry up? Because it wouldn't make sense, because that was the starting point for the treatment. If there was no raw water, then there was no treatment plant. So enough engineering research had been done to say, yes, we have enough water to obstruct for the treatment, and the river is flowing from January to December. So at least that was one. And then also, there was also some capacity building that was done, because the operators had to be trained, because there was a lot of equipment that was installed, digital equipment that was also installed besides the pumps. So the local pump operators had to be trained to make sure that they are able to operate the equipment, and also to maintain, just in case something stops working. And also the client made sure that whatever equipment was installed was something which could be got locally, because sometimes you put in a brand which only has spare parts in Germany, and really, if a pump breaks down today, it means you need a lead time maybe of about 3 months until before you can get the spare part landing in Uganda. So also having brands or companies who have local companies that they've set up in Africa was also something which was used as a way of actually determining the type of brands that could actually be installed at the treatment plant.
Okay, great. Now, and I might have missed this, but what is the continual funding for this? Are the user fees funding? Is there, for maintenance?
Okay, yeah. What they do now is that once the water is treated, then it is now sold. The people don't get it for free. It's coming out of the taps, but there's a water meter that is there. And at the end of the month, each user gets a bill to say, you know what, you owe the water utility so much. And that that money pulled together is what now would be used for maintenance of the water infrastructure, not just maintenance, even payment of salaries for the whole team in the water sector.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Joy.
Thank you.
Next, I'll go to William Muhare.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me to this session. As usual, I'm always happy to interact with you on topics like this. Of course, Joy, you have touched where you developed that project. That's actually in my home district. And I think I participated in putting that project together. And all what you have said is correct, so I'm happy. I was waiting to hear some mistakes, but there was none. So really, thank you so much. Now, I have a controversial project, two of them, in a country X. I name country X. This country was having a problem with meeting Millennium Development Goals, and they had low revenues, high non-revenue water. The customers were unwilling to pay. The bills, of course, very high. Illegal connections everywhere. There was indiscipline. The staff are doing all sorts of things, illegal connections, not coming to work. There was bad public image. The donors were shining away from this company because they were not able to make it. In actual fact, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. The wish of this country was to increase its water service coverage. They wanted to reduce the non-revenue water, and they wanted to raise, of course, additional revenues to meet the operating costs, and that was the most important. And as usual, there was a problem with the donors and other stakeholders. How would they raise money to meet all these obligations? One concerned donor funded a study, and the study came up with a policy, and that policy was the water connection policy. That policy was supposed, if implemented, it was supposed to raise revenue to supplement what was going on, what they were collecting from their billing. So what was this policy saying? One, the connection policy, they raised the connection fees from about maybe $5 to $200, because they thought that with that connection fees, because people wanted water, there was a big demand for water, and plants were working, pipes were built, everything was there. And so they said maybe the best way of getting revenues to supplement what is now being collected will raise the connection fees. So anyone who wants water pays $200. And those who have water and they are disconnected, that they are not able to pay, the policy came up with a reconnection fee of $40. So if you fail to pay for the water, or you delay to pay, they will come and disconnect you. And if you want to be reconnected, you pay $40. And the policy came up and said, look, also, if you want a new connection, you should buy your own materials. You should get your own labor, and you should buy your own meter. In actual fact, all the finances to do with a new connection investment will be paid by the customer. And on top of that, of course, afterwards, you pay your water bill. Imagine, you paid for the connection, and then again, you have to pay for the water that they are supplying you. The policy, the results was, of course, at the end of the policy, the result was there was no significant increase in the water coverage. They were able only to generate 3,000 additional new connections per annum. 3,000, you can imagine. And the revenues, there was a slight increase in the revenue. I think in the period of 3 years, they had managed to collect 1.3 million US dollars. That is from the new connections, then the reconnection fees, and in addition, of course, to the billings they were getting from the new connections. So that was in addition to the company was collecting quite good money. I think it was collecting about 30 to 40, I think $50 million. So that 1.3 million was the additional money from this new connection policy. But what happened? And that's what is surprising. The illegal connections, and I think, Joy, if you have been in Uganda, you know what this means. I mean in that country X. The illegal connections were so rampant, both for those who had been disconnected because they were not able to pay. If they wanted to be reconnected, of course, they would not afford. You know, you've been charged $20 because you are not able to pay that. Now, if they come, if you look for the $20 and you want to pay, they will charge you another $40. So that means you have to look for $60. And of course, the customers were not able to afford. So what they would do, they would team up with the staff and they go and they reconnect them in the night. And of course, another problem was use of substandard materials, because here you are supposed to get your own materials. You're also supposed to get your own labor. So these guys who are buying pipes from the street and they put it in the system. And as Joy knows, within no time, because of the pressures, the pipes would burst. And of course, the resultant is the high non-revenue water. So the revenue water moved from about, I think, 50% to almost 64%, because all the materials used were substandard. The labor was also substandard. And because there was staff indiscipline, what would happen, because the workers were not properly enumerated, as I've said, the staff salaries were not coming on time. So these guys were actually the ones doing these connections for the customers. And there was ones actually doing the illegal connections. They were the ones going into the stores and taking the meters out, stealing actually the meters. So the stores were almost empty because they were stealing the meters. There was a bad public image. So what happened? Naturally, the policy failed. So that's the policy number one. It failed completely. So what happened then? They hired a consulting firm. I think it could have been a Twemel, but I was involved in that. And so this company looked at the policy and said, we're going to put up a new policy. And this policy is going to say the complete opposite. One, no new connection fees. So if you want a connection, just go to the company, put in your application, and you get a connection. No reconnection fee. So if you are being disconnected, imagine you are not able to pay the 20 million. Why should someone ask for 40 million? I mean $40 to go and be reconnected. So you are actually closing people out. So the second policy was saying, please, no reconnection fee at all. The third, the policy was saying, if you wanted a new connection, all the materials, the labor, and the meter would be provided by the company. Of course, that meant that the materials were standardized. So there was no question of anyone going into the field and buying any pipes or any meter or any whatever it is. And even the labor part of it was contracted. So actually this policy helped informing private sector, small private sector companies, which were doing the new connections, which were doing all the labor that you needed to do with the new connection. So in other words, all the investments related to new connections were being made by the company. The customer would only pay at the end of the connection. When they have proved that there is water and they have billed you, then that's when you would pay. Of course, many of you would like to ask, how did this new connection policy, how was it funded? The first one, we can see the customers were the one paying. Now this second one, who was the company? You've already said that the company didn't have any money at all. The salaries were not being paid. there was problem everywhere. So how did the company get money to do this new connection? Now, the consultant proposed to the government that since they were collecting $50 million per annum, let there be a 10% connection fee on the tariff. And automatically that generated $5 million. 10%, just 10%. And if you are, say, the average tariff in that country X was about $1, and the average consumption was about $10. I mean, 10 cubic meters, it should be $10 per month, maybe $10 to $20. So 10% of that, even if you are consuming $20 or 20 cubic meters a month, so that would be like $2 only. So the customer would not feel it. So we proposed that we better do a mass campaign, inform all the customers that if you want now a new connection, you go to that company X and you get a new connection for nothing. All the materials will be provided for you. But of course, in the end, you have to pay that 10%, the $2. In many cases, it was not even felt. Customers did not realize that actually their tariffs were being increased by 10%. I mean, 10% of $10, that's just $1. So many people did not feel it at all. But I can tell you, the whole public was very, very happy that they are getting free new connections. But at the end of it, the company was getting $5 million, you can imagine. So what happened in the end, I think the most important with this policy, especially the second policy, the issue of leadership. During that period, when the second policy was being implemented, they had a very, very strong leader. The leader who could say no to the government, no to the donor, and also who could mobilize the public and tell them that, look, this is the truth. There's no way you want to enter a shop and then they put an entrance fee to a shop. The shop sells merchandise. And the shopkeeper is happy that you enter into the shop. And now there you are saying, before you enter the shop, you pay an entrance fee. So it was unreasonable. And we managed to convince the government, and of course we managed to convince the public, that and even the donor, for that matter, that this issue of a connection fee for someone who wants to enter your shop, and by the way, you imagine, Joy, they went in that Bushenyi district and they established that big, big plant. And now, again, you are telling the customers that if you want to get our water, and the water is already there anyway, millions of dollars have been invested, you have to pay an entrance fee. So that's when we did away with it. And so if we have been disconnected because we are not able to pay the $20, and now someone is saying, yeah, now I've got the $20, but you have to pay $40. We thought that was not tenable. That was nonsense. So the leadership was very strong to say that, look, we are now saying free connection to all. Secondly, customer focus. When you are doing policies of this nature, you have to really look at the customer. What can the customer afford? Already we are dealing with, I think Joy can tell, and even Harold, I think you've been in these countries. I mean, the customer is saying, look, I can only afford $20 a month. Now you are saying, before you enter my house, pay $200. I mean, $200 for most of these countries. It's impossible. So in actual fact, at the end of this policy, the new policy, 20,000 connections were being done every year. And I think when I went to calculate how much money they were making at the end of each year, $7.4 million were being made only from new connections alone. Now, on top of the 50 million which they were collecting, imagine they were able to get $7 million on top of that. Of course, 2.5 of that would be buying the new materials. Now, of course, you wanted to ask, where would the money to buy the materials come from? Now, out of the 10%, the 5 million which they were collecting at the end of the year, half of it would buy the materials, half of it would go for the labor and for the meters. So everything that was needed to make a connection was being bought from that 50%. I mean, from that 10% on the tariff. And of course, when we are calculating the tariff, we did it in such a way that we knew how much the materials would cost. We estimated roughly how many customers would be connected. And of course, wanted also to make a markup for the company because the company had a lot of problems. And third, and I think most important, is the government support. You have to look at the government. If you don't carry the government with you in these countries, nothing would work. I think in the first policy, the biggest problem was that it was donor-driven. I think, and the leadership never cared so much. The government was just opening arms for anyone who gave them money, and they never bothered at all that policy could backfire. So you must make sure that the government is with you, and once it is with you, and you manage to convince them, again with the leadership, government and the leadership. So the leadership must be strong enough to go to the government and say yes. It must be strong enough to go to the donor and say no, this one cannot work. And of course, third and fourth and most important, the staff. You must be able to look at your staff. And at the end of the policy, of this second policy, again, you'll see that the illegal connections reduced tremendously. There were no, of course, there was no need of having an illegal connection when the connection was free. So if you are reconnected, I mean you are disconnected, and you wanted now to be put into the system, you just go and pay your bill and you are reconnected. So the illegal connections went down completely. There was no issue of substandard materials because all the materials were bought centrally by the company, and even the labor was provided centrally by the company. Non-revenue water went down tremendously, I think from 60% to almost 30 to 40%, which was a tremendous success. And of course, there was a very good public image. Imagine customers are being told that from today, if you want a connection, you are going to get it for free. Joy, where you worked in that Bushenyi area, people were just swarming the area offices to get water because the connections were free. And I can testify, I mean, if you ask the connections were free, and I think the company was overwhelmed by the people who wanted water. Sometimes people thought that, yes, water is there, they're going to put it in the house, and they forgot that maybe you will not pay your bill. No, they said, no, okay, we are giving you a free connection, but you have to pay the water bill in the end. So thank you so much. If there's any question, please, I will be able to answer. And the company X, I will not tell you which company it is. For me, I was just a consultant working for 2ML, and I helped in the second policy. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thank you, William. That's a great example of failure that went to a success. And I know we had talked about this briefly. You hit on this, which was important, was for the policy to be, customer driven as opposed to donor driven. Because the first one was definitely a donor driven policy that didn't take into account, what customers could actually pay. Me just sitting here thinking $200 for a connection, that's ridiculous. And so it's really important that, you look at, you get feedback from people on the ground, the staff, and to look at your customer base and what is actually feasible. What I did want you to touch on is, what happened with all of the illegal connections and the staff that were doing those illegal connections. What was the result there?
Yes, I think that's a very, very good question, which I didn't touch. Now, in the new policy, of course, there were many illegal connections. And from our knowledge research, we found out that those illegal connections were actually done by the staff themselves. And so it would be difficult if you want to, because the law, even that law of the first new connection fee was saying, if you are caught with an illegal connection, I think you would be charged $400, and multiplied by, I think, 12 months. And so you would pay a colossal amount of money if you are caught with an illegal connection. And of course, if as a staff, if you are caught in the act of abetting such, of course, you'll be dismissed automatically. So now our search found out that most of these illegal connections were done by our own staff. So you'd go to the customers and the customers tell you, but yes, as much as we are illegally connected or illegally reconnected, but there was someone in your uniform who came to do this job. So why are you not punishing that? But we don't know the name. We don't recall what he's called, but he was in your uniform. So of course we knew that everything was being done internally. So we decided to declare what we call amnesty. And for amnesty, both for those customers who had illegals, we said in the policy, I was a consultant. So in the policy, we recommended that any customer for a period of 2 months or 3 months, if you have an illegal connection, just go to the next office and declare it. You not be charged that illegal connection fee. After 30 days or 3 months, if you don't declare it and you are caught, of course, then you'll have to pay the damages. And you can imagine all the people with all the illegal connections came, and that's why even the revenues increased. That's why the company now started really earning some money, because there were tremendous, a big number of people, more than 3/4 of the people whom we are serving. I think half of it were from people who just were feeding on illegal connections. Now, what did you do with our staff? We also gave them amnesty. We said, well, maybe it was not your fault. Your salaries were not coming on time, and there was no effective leadership. As I said in the period of the first policy, these policies had been done by the government and whatever, so nobody cared. So really, we didn't want to punish people who were just surviving. So we said, even the staff, we don't want to know, although we know those who have been doing it, but we don't want to know. But for the future, if you do any illegal connection and you are caught, then of course you are dismissed. That's what happened. And I think that company, that country X and company Y, I think now they are doing very well. The illegals they are limited. The revenues have gone up. The company is doing very, very well. And I think Joy would be happy to work for that company, because really things are moving in a positive direction.
Okay, great. So to clarify, the illegal connections that were using substandard materials, they were then given proper materials?
Oh, yes, yes. Of course, whenever the company will discover that you have an illegal connection, now, of course, they will take it upon themselves to regularize the connection, and of course, do it with good materials. And if the meters were wrong, then they give you new meters, because everything. You see, that 10% took care of that. Then the $5 million that were earned at the end of the year, I think we budgeted for like $3 million, which was supposed to take care of all that. We know there was already a profit $2 million, which would go to the company, but the $3 million was specifically to take care of those irregularities.
Okay, great. And so you also indicated that there was a leadership change between policy 1 and policy 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was.
Okay. Yeah.
There
So
was.
that's a significant,
a big leadership change.
Big leadership change. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's significant. That's significant to say, to not just follow what a donor wants to do if they haven't had the proper background that's going to serve the population. There is a question. Was there any guidance on how to ensure equitable access? So Eva's surprised that 10% wasn't considered quite large as a proportion of people's income. It might be quite a large increase, depending on the population. So, if people got free connections, in terms of the income of the population, was there a little study that 10% was going to be fine?
No. I think that's a very, very good question. The first policy, actually, the people who were connecting themselves were actually rich people who could afford $200. So those ones who are already in the system, the 10%, if you have been consuming, say, water amounting to $20, $30, or $40 per month, 10%, this is just $4.
Right.
And you see, the increment was made in such a way, and we were very, very careful. And that's how we managed even to convince the government that the clients, the customers will not feel it. And of course, with the public awareness, we made sure we involved the press. In actual fact, many people were overshadowed by the mere fact that the connection was going to be free. So very, very, very many poor people were now swarming the offices, and they could not even entertain someone who is saying that, look, you know, why are you increasing my tariff? People were just anxious. They wanted to get water, and there was no room for anyone coming to complain that, you know, the 4% or 10% or whatever. In actual fact, 10% was not even felt. I mean, water is so important that an increase of $2 on your system, or even $3, that will not make a big difference if you didn't have the service. If the service is poor, because that's a big difference. But if the service is there and you are getting it is regular, and you get your bill all the time, and when you don't have money and you are disconnected, you look for the money, they connect you for free. Everything would be okay. So there was, we had that in mind at the beginning, but in the end we said, look, I think since the guys who have water now are rich, at the rich communities, and we're trying to aim at the poor, and the poor are now going to get water for free, they can afford to pay that additional 10% on the tariff.
Okay, great. Harold, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, just partly to say, Barika, I'm very sorry I have to leave at past. I just can't, I thought it was shorter, could have been done earlier, but just wanted to say, William, I enjoyed your story. I can't imagine what country X is. I'm racking my brains, but I can't think of it. But
I also I've forgotten it. We shall do research.
It raises some very nice issues, which I saw also in Latin America around quite a long time ago now, whereby exactly what you say, you reach the urban core, the kind of wealthier part, then you've saturated your market. Where do you go from there as a utility? If you make it very difficult for poor people to access your services, they won't. They'll turn to other cheaper sources, less safe. So it's a question, do you want a much bigger pie with more consumers, your customer base, or do you, and then gain from that over time? So in these cases, I'm thinking one in Buenos Aires in particular, they made it much easier for people to pay. So they set up little kiosks in the neighborhoods. They reduced so people could pay every week instead of every month, things that help lower the barriers to connection and to service rather than increase the barrier. And then what happens? You have a bigger customer base, everybody wins. So it was a nice story. Thank you.
Yeah, in actual fact, that's what happens. I mean, from 3,000 customers per annum to 20,000, almost 10 times. I mean, that was unheard of. And because of the policy, and then the company was getting even more money. See, these companies, they just bankrupted themselves through the policies which they cannot even explain, through policies which they don't even understand, policies which, something like that. I mean, of course, from the outset, the first policy looked very attractive. My God, every new customer who comes, $200. My God, we are going to get 10,000, then they'll do whatever it is. But in the end, they didn't know that they were creating a barrier to shop. Someone wants to buy a shirt from your shop, and you are saying before you enter it, my God, pay $5 before you enter. My God, the guy will say, I will better buy on the street instead of entering your shop. And that's what was happening. So people are going behind doing the illegal connections because the entry barrier was so high.
So William, this success story has been, is quite a success story. So how come it has not been replicated by other countries? So could you suggest only like 3 to 5 things for other countries or utilities to do in order to replicate the success of country X? You mentioned leadership, but what if there's weak leadership?
I think most important is the question of ownership. Okay, leadership is, of course, leadership alone will not help if the people, the customers, don't own the whole process. If the staff are not involved, if the government is not part of it. So the issue of ownership is very, very, very important. Is it our system? The system which Joy helped in putting together in Bushenyi, is it their system or is it our system? If they look at it as their system, then of course you'll have a problem. But if people look at it as our system, and all of them, the people, the villagers, and I think I remember when I was a consultant advising, I said the people who are around that swamp, around the area, they should all get free connection. They should be helped, even, even subsidized water, yeah? So that the project becomes their project. So ownership is very, very, very important. And two, knowledge. You must be knowledgeable. You must be able to scan the environment, know your customer, know who you are dealing with. Is your customer able really, if you say the $200 as Barika you've said, I mean, this is ridiculous. But it could have been, even if it is $100, even if it is $50, is it really reasonable? So know your customer. What is it he can afford? Also know your staff. Because if you are not paying your people, you're not paying them very well, suddenly they will be the ones going behind doing those illegal things because they want to, that's why I called it moonlighting. They'll be the moonlighting. Because in the day, you think you come to the office, you find the coats behind the chairs, you think they have gone to the toilet, but they are busy doing things because they want to survive. They have families at home. Joy, you are laughing. Yes, that's what happens. The coat is always on the chair, but the guys are not there. They are doing so. Know your staff, know your customers, know your policies. Maybe the third, I can say, the resources are always there. Money is always there. I have no problem with money. And many of you will know that the donors are there with plenty of money. The money is not a problem. But maybe you need to have a backup plan. What if policy X does not work? What can you do as an alternative? So when you are a manager, we used to be taught that we must always think in alternatives. You must always have a plan B somewhere, because you never know. God, you plan, but God plans in another way. Harold is doing other things. Joy is planning some other things. Barbara is saying this and this and this. So everyone has his own plan. So even you should have a backup plan. So don't think that what you are doing, God has blessed. You can pray as many times as you want to pray, but you don't know what Barbara is praying for. So it could be praying to get what you want, actually. So always have a backup plan. So those three things, I think, those of you who are managers and you want to be managers, ownership is very, very important. Knowledge, you have to have knowledge. You have to know who you are dealing with. You must know your people. And three, always try to have a backup plan, because anything can happen. Harold could be praying for something else. He wants to make his money, and for you are busy saying that he loves you, when in actual fact, he doesn't at all. The same can be the opposite. Okay, that's, I think, the three things I would recommend.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, William, for that great example. Okay, so going on to Barbara.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So I'm going to shift continents and actually give an example of some experiences that I've had working in Jordan. So I've spent quite a bit of time in Jordan over the last 10 years working with the government on kind of a number of water sector reform issues. But one of the examples that I think really highlights some of the challenges in trying to improve service delivery is related to Jordan. About 20 years ago, there was a big push to corporatize utility services. So they devolved authorities and responsibilities from the central government to three major water utility companies in the three kind of significant urban areas. And at first, there was tremendous success. Cost recovery levels went up, NRW levels went down, all the KPIs you want to see. They were able to bring in kind of new private sector expertise. This is the whole idea, right? So these utility companies were established under the corporations law. They were able to hire independently. They were able to set up corporate governance structures. They were set up, I think, wisely given the conditions on the ground. The infrastructure stayed owned by the government because that was the investment that the government had made, and that the companies weren't going to be able to have the revenues to do the kind of to do more than O&M cost recovery. So that was fine. But and again, all that started fine. And then the government kind of slowly started eroding the independence of those utility companies. And you could almost track performance with that erosion of independence. You saw a lot of cost recovery levels going up. You saw a lot of NRW levels going, I'm sorry, cost recovery getting bad again, getting less than O&M cost recovery. Non-revenue water was creeping up for some of the utilities above 60%, right? This is in a country that has some of the most severe water scarcity in the world. The last thing you want to do is waste water you're already producing, right? So non-revenue water is a major, major deal. And it was, probably 50-50 administrative and physical losses. And these weren't all down to the water sector, right? So some of this was central government authorities were being rolled back. The utility companies were told they could no longer hire on their own initiative. So they had to start hiring again under civil service laws. So all of these kind of little ways that the government was trying to, I think, save money or exert controls as they were dealing with their own external pressures. You had a couple of recurring shocks. You had the Arab Spring and a very significant influx of Syrian refugees. That kind of threw demand curves out the door. You had a lot of the central government really feeling the need to have to manage water services as demand centers were shifting and supply wasn't always available. And so there were a lot of understandable sort of reasons as things went along, but genuinely, you've just seen it scale back, scale back, scale back to the point where the government wasn't even upholding its own end of the deal, right? So there's these assignment agreements with the utility companies that have established these companies, and they weren't even kind of holding true to those terms. So I think that one of the things that I take as a lesson to this, well, one step back, the result has been the worst of both worlds, right? So as the companies don't have the independence to function kind of fully corporatized companies, the government's taken on more responsibilities, which means the companies have no incentives, right? They're not going to be rewarded for better performance. The government has to take on more financial responsibilities, and it's just a vicious cycle down, right? And so I think the lesson for these kinds of structural reforms, and it gets to a little bit of something Harold had said as well, is that you have to get the legal mechanisms right too, but you have to mean it. The mechanism was right and it was done properly, but you've got to you can't just roll it back for convenience sake, right? And there wasn't enough security or kind of to William's point of plan B, there wasn't corresponding structural changes in things like regulation, right? So the government felt that as performance started to drop, that they had to step in because there was no kind of other alternative for what they felt was a certain level of accountability. And I think accountability is a really, really huge issue here, right? And so if you don't have, the government doesn't trust that the companies are doing the right things, and the customers don't trust that the government or the companies is doing the right things, you create a real vacuum of public trust that really gets in the way of all of the other reforms that need to happen to improve services, right? And now you're running into, added scarcity challenges with climate change. And it's really put everybody in a very difficult position because you need to now move to, for example, well, not for example, Jordan now will have to move towards large-scale desalination. This is expensive. Water rates are going to have to go up, right? There's no way and yet there's not, the service levels haven't been able to improve at a sufficient level to kind of justify an increase in tariffs. So it's really kind of, everybody's stuck. And they're working to get out of it, and there's some really positive things that are happening, but it's really taken the sector to get to a crisis point for there to be that buy-in and commitment and leadership, and frankly, leadership that has to come from beyond the water sector. And that's been, in the last couple of years, the biggest change that we're seeing, and the biggest kind of, I think, pivot point for why I think the reforms are going to stick this time, right? Because it's not just the water sector kind of waving its arms frantically about how crazy things are and how what needs to happen to realistically manage Jordan's incredibly scarce resources effectively. But it's finally breaking through as a significant financial investment from the government is going to have to go into desalination. That there's a whole level of operational, legal, structural, and institutional changes that have to happen in a package, right? You can't pull them apart. So that's kind of an example of what doesn't work. I think you can't do things in half measures, and you need to be able to ensure there's an accountability mechanism when you do start to kind of let service providers be the answer to their own kind of solutions, right? But there's some things that are working, right? And I think that one of the biggest success stories, and I'll use Jordan again, is, in this age of water scarcity and in this age of climate change and the fact that a lot of freshwater resources are declining globally, and certainly they're declining very significantly in Jordan. There's been a genuine, coherent strategy, and it's been executed to significantly increase the levels of treated effluent that is of sufficient quality for irrigation. And the percentage of irrigation water that comes from freshwater resources has gone down from about 78% 25 years ago to 50%. And that's a really positive trend in a country that's really, really struggling. And I think that it has a lot of political demands to ensure that agriculture and irrigation continues to get resources. And there's actually just this year a policy commitment from the government to actually now freeze the volume of freshwater supplies going to irrigation at current levels, while then investment is being made in these kind of alternative sources, right? Non-traditional, non-conventional sources of irrigation water, like more treated effluent, like small-scale rainwater capture, small-scale desalination for brackish water, et cetera. So I think when there is, and part of this has been able to be executed because there was a really good cooperation between the Ministry of Water and the Ministry of Agriculture, again, to the point that water issues have to be addressed not just within the sector, but beyond the sector, because they genuinely are central to health, prosperity, economic development, and water security and food security more broadly, right? So I will leave it there.
Thanks, Barbara. So one question, so when you said that there needed to be leadership, or that there's now leadership beyond the water sector, who else is stepping up?
It's coming down from the Prime Ministry and actually the King. So there's been a broader all of government call for reforms and a recognition that, again, of the central role that water has to play. And part of this is financially driven. As these issues have continued to kind of worsen and the challenges to deepen, not only has the financial burden for the water sector grown for the government, but then obviously there needs to be this major investment, and that gets people's attention. So you now literally have advocates in the Ministry of Finance, and you've got advocates in the Prime Ministry, and you've got champions that kind of within private sector, as well as then former ministers and some other kind of senior officials.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, water is, the underpin of everything of life. Right?
Right.
Okay. So we have one question for you. So what a great example of good and bad. Good being corporatized utilities, and bad, the government intervention. In essence, this good-bad combination proves the efficacy of a corporatized approach. Did the contract with the companies allow them to seek damages from the government? Because it sounds like the government did not abide by its contractual obligations to the corporatized entities. So one lesson might be for a tighter contract to increase the pain for the government meddling later to the detriment of utilities. So could the legal framework help to mitigate the situation?
What a great question. I don't know precisely what kind of redress there was built into the assignment agreements. I do know there was little to no willingness on the part of the utilities, because the government still owned all their assets and still had, was the chairman of their board and still, played this major role. And it gets to something that Harold had said: you can't regulate yourself, right? And essentially, the government was serving as the utilities regulator. They were overseeing their performance management and their performance monitoring. And so when they were the ones getting in the way of performance, they're not going to be super fast to point the finger at them, at their own actions, right? So this is something that's actually very much being considered in the kind of the current reform package is how do you really codify and kind of harden those lines between various roles and responsibilities. And there's been some very difficult conversations with the government in full transparency about and they're very real concerns of like, well, what if the utilities aren't performing properly? That's the pathway for people to get water. And you have to kind of talk about, there's still ways for the government of Jordan to hold the utilities accountable. It doesn't have to be the Ministry of Water holding the utilities accountable, right? There's a lot of other ways. And I think you use the contract itself as one of those mechanisms. We talked about regulation by contract as one way. There's also plenty of public accountability measures that are very, very viable. And you do have some well-functioning regulatory bodies in Jordan, and there's some real consideration of adding water into an independent regulatory structure that does already exist.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Barbara.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit more Q&A. Yes, Harold.
Yeah, I wonder if, because I have to go soon, I could ask a question to Barbara. Sure. Barbara, you spoke about accountability and government political meddling kind of from the government into the corporatized board, let's say, of the utility. What about the relationship between consumers and the utility? And I ask because I looked fairly recently at a USAID funded project actually about in Lebanon. And I wonder if it's can I say a cultural thing whereby one of the things that this project did was to actually have a kind of a open forum, I think you would call it a town hall meeting, where the directors of the utility sat and listened to the consumers. And according to these reports, this was the first time they'd ever done it. So there might be this complete kind of blank or unawareness about listening to consumers. And it sounded like it was a very impactful thing, because for the first time they weren't sitting up on high and kind of dismissing everything, but actually listening. Was this the case in Jordan? And do you think it's a cultural thing, or is it the way that they just don't have the mechanisms to allow this to happen? And maybe for Africa, I mean, Joy and William could comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it started as a structural thing, right? I mean, if you're only kind of having to report up to the government side, that's where you're accountable to them and not to your customers. And there wasn't incentives built in for them to listen to the customers who are, like, in their opinion, it's only going to be a bunch of people complaining. But actually, the utilities did start holding some town hall like forums with the customers. And I think that the utility leaders themselves were shocked at how productive they found those conversations. I don't think that, well, I know they haven't been kind of, it's not all three of them are doing it. Two of them were doing it. But what you still have is frankly the ministry spokesperson holding like Facebook Live meeting sessions about water services. There's a disconnect there. That's the utilities provide water services, so the ministry spokesperson shouldn't be the one having kind of a Q&A around utility services. And these circles have to be squared, right? So these are the things that we've got that have to be reconciled and pulled apart. But there's very much a growing effort within the companies to genuinely try to create viable, meaningful mechanisms to engage with their customers and provide some of those levels of customer engagement. There is a public trust deficit that they have to fix. And I think there's a growing awareness of that and an appreciation that that is important.
So Barbara, it seems that if community ownership may not be as strong as it could be, a proxy indicator of this is water running in the streets of Amman for hours, if not days. Would greater ownership of customers to report leakage be possible?
Yes, and that is absolutely part of what's going on right now in terms of investments on non-revenue water reduction. And there's been a recognition that the previous investments in non-revenue water reduction have been about the pipes. It's been, and it's also changing KPIs, right? So right now the customer service response KPI is basically going to just check and verify that there's a leak, not the time to actually fix it. It's a bit of a disconnect there, right? So there's some shifts that are happening now to kind of realize that there needs to be a solution oriented KPI. So the customer's like, I reported this, like, no, we did, thank you so much. And the company says, we really appreciate it, but water is still running for days out in front of their house. So yeah, it's a work in progress.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Harold. I know you have to go. So thank you so much for your participation. We have one more question for Joy. And it's also by Harold. So clearly the central government in Zimbabwe is struggling due to decades of sanctions, lack of access to hard currency, and the exodus of talent. Is the decentralized approach towards WASH necessary in this situation, or is it still better if all is coordinated and financed by the central government? And for the remaining development partners, are they more willing to fund at the national level, or do they prefer the local level?
Okay, thanks, Barik. I think what I can say there is that there are non-governmental organizations like UNICEF, like UNDP. Those are doing work. I know UNDP is doing work in Chimanimani with local government, where we had the cyclones ravaging houses and things. So they are doing work there just to make sure that people have homes again, and there's also looking at the WASH, people have access to potable water. So UNDP is on the ground, they are working. I know they're working with local government. And we also have UNICEF. UNICEF also is engaging even local authorities, where they are doing work also in local authorities, Kadoma, and other local authorities looking at water and also sanitation. And then we also have central government also being out on a drive to build dams together with the Zimbabwe National Water Authority, where they are building dams, not just for irrigation, but also to make sure that the towns have adequate raw water, for treatment. So yeah, I think these are capital intensive projects. And also given that the towns are growing bigger than what infrastructure can actually sustain at the moment, a lot has to be done. But I think work is there on the ground. It's just that maybe because there's now so many people living in rural areas going to towns, it tends to seem like there's nothing going on. But water provision is right now with local authorities, where they're the ones that buy chemicals and also treat the water, distribute, and get paid for that water, But central government, in a new policy, the Zimbabwe Human Settlements Policy, local government is now mandated to look at off-site infrastructure, which is now these dams that I've been talking about, making sure that there is adequate dams that have been built, which now will feed raw water to the local authorities for treatment. So it's everyone has their own portion that they need a role to play, so that it's the whole chain at the end of the day gets fed. Thanks.
Thank you, Joy. Barbara, I do want to go back to you when you said that, in terms of the last question, and that, there's still work to be done and needing to change the KPIs. What, and especially, okay, a customer has reported, but then there's no follow-up. What's being put in place in order to make that happen?
So basically what's happening internally within the utilities. They've now developed, each of the utilities has actually now developed a new kind of comprehensive non-revenue water reduction action plan. And part of it is actually updating those KPIs. So those KPIs are now updated within the utilities, but it had to be, what the impetus of it was actually looking at non-revenue water reduction as the critical issue it is, given the scarce water supplies in Jordan. So that created the incentives within the utility management to really hone in on where and how non-revenue water was happening, right? So, but on the physical side, again, it's not good enough to identify the leak. You've got to actually fix it. And so that's why these metrics they're now changing. They're very much now changing, but it's being driven on good governance, right? Good, effective corporate governance. Let's actually look at what some of our most significant O&M challenges, non-revenue water. So let's put together a comprehensive non-revenue water reduction action plan that's got clear investment targets, it's got management targets, it's got operational systems changes, processes changes, and it's literally even now being reflected back in the new national water strategy. It's that significant and that important.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so we have a question for William. The National Water and Sewer Company example in Uganda is so inspiring, and you, William, were a big part of this. Why can NWSC example be replicated in other countries? What must be done to replicate this example?
Yes, I've had this question many times, and I'm happy it's coming up. Yes, we've tried through the 2ML consulting company to replicate some of the policies, some of the change management systems we implemented at National Water in other countries, and with a lot of success. And apparently, when I left National Water straight away, I was contracted by many donor friends and many countries, even governments. Went to Sierra Leone, the Guma Valley Company. I was the first one, and I think there was a big improvement. Then went to Ghana Water. Ghana Water, Harold has been to Ghana, and many of you have been to Ghana. Ghana Water was having a big problem. It actually had a private operator there, Vitens, also from Dutch Vitens and Rand, and the project actually collapsed, and they called on me and my company to see if we could offer some solutions. Indeed, we did. And as we talk, Ghana Water is one of those most liquid companies on the African continent. They collect more than $70 or $80 million per month. Cumulatively, that's quite per month. That's quite a lot of money. And in actual fact, Ghana Water is swimming in liquidity because we implemented some of the policies which we did in Uganda. We discussed it with them. They own them, and they're doing Rwanda. The WASAC company was the same. The government of Rwanda invited this government in Rwanda. It was actually interesting. Whereas in Sierra Leone it was donor-driven, in Ghana it was also donor-driven. In Rwanda it was people-driven. The government paid for our services. We couldn't imagine. So we're under stress because not the government, the corporation was paying for our services. We felt so bad that you go into a company which is struggling, and then they have to get money to pay you. So we had a lot of stress to make sure that we perform. And indeed, as we talk, WASAC is now one of those few African water utilities that are able to meet most of their demand. They even have a private operator operating a plant, and they are paying. They are paying the operator from their own resources. And we've been, of course, in Jordan. We did a lot of work through GIZ in Jordan. And Jordan was a very, very interesting cooperation with GIZ. And I think even the few things that are happening down there are through our cooperation. So these examples, I mean, reforms or change management are not a monopoly of one institution or two institutions. Anyone can change, but of course there must be a leadership. Very, very important. The leader must be able to say yes or no when it is supposed to be said. Mm-hmm. And of course, you must be able to be committed. Secondly, you must have government support. If government is not with you, that does not mean that you become a party member. Because if you become a party member, then of course you are in problems. What if the party changes? The leaders, then you are in problems. So in actual fact, leaders must be diplomatic, must be, I used to say, I used the word and I had a problem. It must be apolitical. Yes, you must be seen to be political, supporting the government, but people who consume your water, some of them are from the opposition, some of them are rebels, some of them are whatever. So you have to be very careful how you handle the situation. If you're termed as a rebel, then of course you'll have a problem. If you are termed opposition, then of course you're going to have a problem. If you are termed pro-government, then when the next government comes, you are gone. So you have to play. I mean, I managed to manage national for 13 years. Everyone wonders, how did you do it? I mean, I had 7 ministers all across, but they would come and go. So how you manage to go through those valleys of problems is the magic. So the examples are, they can be replicated. And we are going to Zambia, we are going to Lilongwe. And if you know of countries which really have problems, you can always interact, because we think that the water system in Africa, the water system in the third world, we have been to Asia, to Central America, Trinidad and Tobago. We did a lot of changes down there. So these things can be done. And you only have to have the commitment and the goodwill, and of course, plan B. Then you move on.
And the magic. Yeah, so for Rock Blue uses the acronym ROCKS. So to help design projects and stand the chance of being durable. The letters stand for resources, ownership, connection, knowledge, and secondary backup plan. You might have different elements, but that's something that I hear is a thread through everything that you all have said so far today. So, and I think William, you had said, kind of your 3 to 5 elements, but I'll let, Barbara and Joy also. So if I was a designer of a development project and could only ensure 3 to 5 elements that would result in success, what would those elements be? And are those elements practical and achievable from your past experiences?
I mean, I can go quickly, Joy, and then I'll turn it over to you. I mean, I think that the first truism, I've been working in development for 30 years, is that there's no silver bullet and there's no one size fits all, right? So I think it's about, to me, it always seems to come down to incentives, accountability, and responsibility. And it's that those things have to be working together towards the objectives of the program, right? And those objectives, the program's objectives will always fail if they're not aligned with the counterpart's objectives, right? So it fundamentally has got to be a program that's demand driven by the local counterparts, by the water organizations that you're working with, be it the service providers, be it the local government, the authorities, the national government, it doesn't matter. As soon as you try to impose something, like, we don't have all the answers, the development community certainly doesn't have all the answers. And as soon as we try to impose something, it fails. It has got to be aligned with the local needs and the local priorities and the local challenges. It doesn't mean you can't have a robust conversation around what elements of those priorities could really matter and you can really kind of engage on, but you have to ground it in those realities. And programs can only be sustainable if there's incentives built into the local systems of governance to be able to actually keep them going. We've seen this over and over again. And USAID's even done some formal, ex post evaluations on the effectiveness of their programming, right? If you're only focusing on pipes and pumps, it's going to fail. Nothing is sustainable without governance and resources, right? And the right incentives to keep those systems functioning, both in terms of the actual service providers and the authorities and the customers.
Great, thank you. We do have, Joy, before you go, we do have another question for Barbara. Do the aid agencies put enough emphasis on sustainable, durable solutions? For example, does a contractor pay the price for a failed project years down the road? I would say no. The contractors are only responsible for implementing the project with little focus on long-term success. What could aid agencies do to ensure durability of their investments beyond the life of the project?
So in some ways, I think the aid agencies definitely put plenty of emphasis on sustainability and durability. I just don't think that the aid agencies necessarily know how to get there yet. So I think that it's something that we always struggle with and we always wrestle with, and any, kind of implementing partner worth their salt needs to actually be, that should be consideration number one, right? But to me, this means you've got to be building in ongoing analysis, ongoing metrics about, what's taking root, what's not. Because if you're only focused on an output-driven implementation, let's get to the 5-year work plan, here's these results. I do think there can be a little too much focus within aid programming on here's the expected results. And it's a hard target that might not be as well informed as it should be, frankly, when if you haven't made some of the systemic and structural changes, that target won't last, right? So I do think that you have to build in ways in which the systems and the institutions themselves are changing to ensure durability. And those metrics are a heck of a lot harder, to track and to judge and to evaluate. So I think that is some of the challenges that we all face.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. Okay, thank you, Barbara. Joy, you can touch on the question I asked you before in terms of like the 3 to 5 kind of things to put that are that are necessary to kind of put in place or to have. And then I also have another question for you. So too few women, this is changing the focus a little bit, but too few women are involved in WASH. We all know that, right? Even though the 3 of us are right here. And yet they suffer the most when water and sanitation fails. I know you're part of Rock Blue's Bulu Initiative for Female Leadership Empowerment, but how can government and development agencies increase the number of female leaders in WASH? That's a big question.
Okay, I'll start on the project side. For me, a project just has to have funding, and I've been on projects where the funding is readily available and projects where there's nothing. You have to go and beg. Once a contractor puts in their payment certificate, you have to go to the client and beg, just to pay. And it really can get exhausting. And because the contractor will just either slow down or they'll tell you that they're moving from site until the money is available. So for me, financing, the resources have to be available so that when you need to pay, you need to pay. And also if resources are not available, it means that even the client starts getting cheap. You want to put in a certain brand of pump. They're telling you, there's not enough money. Why don't we put this brand? But it's not as good as this other brand. So at the end of the day, as an engineer, you get compromised because when the project is done, you are associated with that project. They start wondering which engineer was here. Look at this. This is cheap. This is not working. 2 years down the line, this is broken down. So there just has to be enough resources so that whatever you want to put in can be purchased. And then there's also the issue of the buy-in, ownership, even from ownership from the surrounding communities. If they don't own the project, just as William was saying, people will just steal. You put in a pipe, if it's going above the ground, you put in those clamps, the next day they're gone. Because people are just saying, there are some people who are putting in a pipe. But if they understand that this pipe is for them, they are the ones that are going to get the water and benefit from this project, then they have ownership. Once they see someone wanting to vandalize, they are in charge to say, what, get away from there. They become soldiers, but if there's no ownership, if it's them and us, then you find you put in a valve, tomorrow it's gone. You put in this, tomorrow it's gone. So there has to be that ownership. And then also the knowledge. If people don't know what they're going to be doing on site, I'm telling you, it's going to be a disaster. You have to have a contractor who knows what they're doing, engineers who know what they're doing and what they're supervising, so that there's a smooth flow of work that is being done. And at the end of the day, you get a quality product that is produced. So for me, those are key. Resources, ownership, and also the knowledge. People have to know what they're doing on site. Then the other question, I think what can be done, and I think what is being done. I know it'll take time. You know, it's unfortunate that it's been years that people really, it's even up to now, you know, when people are told there's an engineer Makumbe that you're going to meet, if they have to put in a letter before, they say, dear sir, you know, because they're used to an engineer being a man. Recently, I had a guy who put in, I said, dear sir, so I told him, I'm not going to serve you until you really, really apologize to me. You need to buy me lunch. And really apologize because you've just said all engineers are men. No, he was really professor. I'm really sorry. I said, I hope you've learned your lesson. That's not engineer titles are men. But it's unfortunately that it's there. But I think the education is although slow, is going out. We need to see more women being more vocal and being more seen on the platforms, you know, because we have a lot of great women out there, but they're silent, and so no one knows about them. So they have to be out there, and so such that they also encourage the younger women or the women who want to give up. You know, recently on my LinkedIn profile, I had a lady just reach out to me in my inbox. I think I'd written a story where I just said something had been done by a male counterpart and how I'd reacted. I just told him that, you know what, just go away, you know, because I'm not, you know, I'm here to stay. So she came to my inbox, says, you know what, this story really motivated me because I was just thinking of throwing in the towel. I didn't know this girl, and you know, but she just read my story on LinkedIn. So I said, it really motivated me to really hang in there. So I said, yeah, if you're really passionate about engineering and it's something that you want to do, don't let anyone push you out. So you just hang in there. I also still face those issues, but because I'm more mature, you know, for me, I really don't care. I'll just give you an eye to tell you that, you know what, if you don't like it, just go away, but I'm not going to be the one going away. And also government has to put in even like quota systems. And, you know, people, when you talk of quota systems, people think we're saying get women who have not passed, who are not capable, you know, like that. No, we're just saying that people should give women a chance, because the mentality is if there are two people who've applied for the same position, both good, people always skew for the men, you know. So we are saying that give women an opportunity who are capable, who have passed, give them an opportunity also to prove themselves. So I think government should really be more strict to say, yes, we've put in that quota system, we've encouraged even the workplace. Right now, there's, like in Zimbabwe, there's a gender policy where they need to see how many women you've employed, you know. So that I think should be not just end at policy level, because sometimes the policies are not implemented. You know, the policy is there, but no one is really following up to make sure that it's being implemented. So government has to make sure that it's being implemented. Workplaces should have more women. You know, on the sites that I supervise now, because that's the first thing I do. I say, where are the women here, you know, or to the contractor? So they always rush and say, come and see. That's a woman carpenter, that's someone who's doing that. So I always try to push that. And I talk to the ladies there, you know, to say, you know what, girls are doing a great job. And the men always laugh. I say, you know, you show the boys how it's done, you see. So we need more of that interaction, more of the encouragement to have these women be on site and stay there, because sometimes they're there and the site is really hostile, you know. And I think the education also has to be on the men's side to say, you know what, the women can also do what you guys can do. So don't be hostile or just shut someone off because they are a woman. Say, I don't think they can produce anything. So that education needs to be there so that we can actually get more women on board.
Yes, I agree. I think we can have a whole OLS on this as well, because you know, it's important for us to be mentors to younger women as well. You know, have organizations and be part of organizations such as the Society of Women Engineers. They are global, but just like what you said, it's important to have men as advocates as well. Most times people look to the disadvantaged class to be their own advocate. And that's just not,
Yeah.
that just doesn't help, because we're always fighting. And so thank you so much for that. And maybe we'll in 2023 we can do a session on this as well. Barbara, would you like to chime in?
I just want to say we all need to be advocates for equity, and I think this is the other issue. Kind of, Joy, you touched on it. This isn't about skewing opportunities to women. It's just ensuring that there's equity and access to the opportunities fairly, and not just for women, for anybody in a disadvantaged position, right? It's unfortunately, there's a lot of marginalized groups. There's a lot of reasons that people become marginalized, and I think it's getting so much better, but we, especially kind of as leaders, absolutely need to be super mindful of it and do everything we can to ensure that there is equitable access across the board.
Yes, and that's important, because equity is not equality. They're not the same. William, would you like to interject or add to?
I mean, I don't understand, because in my profession all along, I've worked with women. I live with women. I love women. I have found them to be very, very innovative, very knowledgeable, very enterprising. So I don't think, and I don't see any difference, by the way. In actual fact, at National Water, most of my managers were all, most of them were women. And I had a few women engineers, and they were doing a fantastic job. Joy, if I had known you around that time, certainly you'd be one of the great engineers down there. And if they call you sir, say hello, no problem. I like to invite you. Who is going to invite me for lunch? My God, I can call you all sirs, please. If you can invite me for lunch, I'd be very happy. So, take it as a compliment, but you are moving. So long as you are confident, so long as you know what you are doing. And in actual fact, for us in our business, in management, in leadership, we found ladies to be more reliable. And by the way, you should know yourself that you are more reliable, you are more respected. So don't get behind and think that people are looking at you. They are not looking at you, they are actually afraid of you. Actually, if you ask me, I'm afraid of women, because I know what you can do at home here. My wife manages me as if I'm a kid. And so, I think you ladies, you have all what it takes. And you only have to come out and show to us that you are who you are, and don't hide behind the woman pictures. But the way I was talking to Barika the other day, my God, and even all of you, the way you are contributing, who can say that a woman, what? No, please. So, Joy, don't worry about the lunches. Take as many as you possibly can, and let them call you sir. It's okay. It's very, very positive. It means that they are saying, wow, you guys, you are doing it and you are there. Okay, so that's what I can say. Okay. Don't go behind. Go ahead.
William, it seems like your standard needs to be proliferated through lots of other countries, and both the employment of women as managers and engineers, and being at the forefront of WASH, because just like the question said, is that we are the most affected in this industry. So thank you so much. Let's see if we have any more questions, or are there any other last thoughts or ideas that you want to share?
Just to thank you for the opportunity to share. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Joy, for being here as well, and William, and to Harold. This has been a great OLS. And for those of you who are participating, if you will complete the post-event survey that will pop up at the end when the webinar closes. So this ends today's webinar, and we're always looking for new topics and diverse panelists, which are central to our own values and critical for developing solutions to the challenges we face in the WASH sector. So we would appreciate if you would please fill out the post-event survey to provide your valuable feedback. And if you've enjoyed our online lecture series and panel discussions and would like to help us put on more, please consider making a donation on our website, rockblue.org. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. I'm waiting for the Joy, Barika, Barbara. I'm waiting for
definitely.
I'll come to Uganda for lunch.
Okay, thank you so much. All the best. Bye-bye.
Great to meet you, William.
Uganda. Okay, bye-bye.
Definitely. Bye-bye.
Bye.